Hi, I'm Susie Schumacher, and welcome to Let's Fly, a space for honest stories about healing, growth, and being human. The moments that test us, teach us, and remind us what we're capable of. In this special episode, in honor of Pride Month, I sit down with Berndt, who shares his coming out story and what it was like growing up gay with die-hard Mormon parents, and the moment he told them, and why their response wasn't what you might expect. He also talks about how group therapy became a turning point in accepting himself and how his Mormon mission unexpectedly helped him discover his calling to become a therapist. Let's dive in. Hi, John, and welcome to Let's Fly.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. And in honor of Pride, I've invited you to come here to share your coming out story.
Well, interesting, I think. I've been asked about this a few times. When people find out a few things about my life, my story, they are so intrigued, and a lot of it will kind of take the spotlight. So the first thing I'll say is that I grew up as a Mormon, and that
Okay.
usually gets people like, "Oh my God, I want to find out all about." It's rather it's not something I love. Kind of being the representation of one religion. I don't love that
Right.
position. You know, my own family, my older brother and my little sister said things to me, teased me for being effeminate or gay or whatever.
Okay.
And I even had one of them when I finally did come out, one of them said, "Is it because I called you gay when you were little?"
Wow.
They thought that was the reason. And I'm like, "No, that's not the reason." And so it was very I grew up in a situation where anything outside of the heteronormative sexual concept of woman and man, no sex before marriage, marrying each other only early, like 21, 21 latest for women. I knew that that was what I was to do. And so, like, through when I started to hit puberty and started to kind of understand more about sexuality and sex, which I got zero information from my family about that. Nothing.
Hmm.
There was never any kind of outside of that idea. That was what was presented to me. And when I was growing up, I lived in a very conservative, sheltered kind of lifestyle, which was all about the Mormon faith. It was sheltered, and with that came, this is what your life is going to be like, and it wasn't like you have to do it this way. It was always an unstated kind of, this is how it is in our culture. So it was kind of expected and known and wanted. It wasn't like I was thinking, God, I got to do this. I was thinking, well, when I get back from my mission, I'll find a woman and settle down. But before that, I was pretty, interested in men. It was obvious to me that I was gay, and so, but I couldn't tell anyone, and I didn't tell anyone. And so, a lot of the experience that I had was internal, and it was with friends, who knew, but it was never out and open to my family ever. And so my family kind of just thought, well, he's not that interested in a relationship or relationships. He's just kind of on his own. And they didn't really question
Okay.
or think about it, you know?
Hmm.
So I'm going through this whole thing. My family thinks I'm a certain way. My church thinks I'm a certain way. I know I'm a different way. And I just kind of let that happen. And so I was getting ready, as I was getting ready to turn 19, I was getting ready to go on a mission and for the church. And I started to really struggle with the interviewing process. They would ask questions to see if I was like worthy and if I was you know, um, chaste and those kinds of things. And I remember specifically that some of these men who you had interviews with, it was like the bishop of the ward of the congregation. He would sit down and ask questions like, do you believe in God and do you believe in Jesus and do you believe in the prophet? And all these questions, they had a range of questions that were relatively easy to answer. And then they would get to one question in particular and they'd say, do you have any unpure thoughts about the opposite sex? And I would say no. And I felt good about that because that was true. Had they ever asked, "Do you have any unpure thoughts about the same sex?" I'd say, "You got me." But they never asked the question, and I thought, "Well, I'm okay." It was so naive, and so it's interesting because it's like, well, even at that age, I knew what they were getting at, and I could have said, but I there was no way I would. So I passed all of the, requirements. I put in my paperwork, and I got a mission call to South Africa, and I went to Johannesburg, South Africa for 2 years. And during that time, I was I was pretty determined to use that 2 years to straighten me out. Literally, I really thought I prayed constantly, and this was before I went on my mission. I prayed constantly to not be gay, like, all the
Wow.
time, all the time, and when I was on my mission, I prayed constantly to, "I'm doing this for 2 years, I'm sacrificing for 2 years. Please, when I get home, please let me not be gay, and please let me, do the right thing," you know? And, I mean, it was constant. Even if I wasn't down on my knees and praying, I was constantly thinking and feeling, "This is what you do to get this to happen." And I was really good about it. Loved my experience being a missionary. It was, thrilling to be on the other side of the world. I got back from Africa, and very quickly, I moved out of my family's home. I came back to their home and lived there for just a short time before I got an apartment in Pasadena, and I started living, alone for the first time in Pasadena. I remember thinking when I got back, I want to move out of my house to see if I am still a Mormon when I live on my own. I wanna see if I still go to church when I am alone and not under my family's roof. And I moved out, to Pasadena, and I never went to church again.
Okay.
Like, it was like the first Sunday I didn't go to church, and never again, because I knew that I was gay. And so then I started struggling with being gay, and really starting to struggle with the mission didn't work. This didn't correct me. I continued to pray because I always prayed about it, and it started to feel like this isn't working. I need to figure something out. And I started to get very, at this point, I started to get very, so I was probably 20, I was 22, like right in there, because I got back at 21. I was probably around 22. 22 to 23 was a really tough year for me. That was when I really started to feel like it's either go full on Mormon or go full on gay. It's one or the other. And I met a guy, my first boyfriend, Sheldon, which that was a mess. It was just a mess. But my first boyfriend that I felt pedo deals for, I moved
Mhm.
in with him, into his house, and we moved again together. And my family is like, "Oh, your roommate." It was that whole classic story of, my roommate and stuff like that. This guy was 10 years older than me, 7 years.
Okay.
It's like my roommate. Uh-huh. Right. So, this was like 91, I think. I
Okay.
came back from my mission in 89. So I was 21 in 89, 22 in 90. So it was right around 90, 91 when all of this was happening. And so I was living with Sheldon, and I realized I need to tell people. Before that, though, what really got me to get to the point where I needed to come out was not just the internal struggle I was happening with, like God and religion and Jesus and my family. It was also, I was starting to become pretty depressed, and I got really, really low. I never got to the point of wanting to kill myself or commit suicide. That was never, in the Mormon church, that's a pretty big deal. And it never was something that I ever thought of doing, ever. But I got to the lowest point that I can remember ever being in. And I started to, I remember going to my primary care physician, he was this short little, like, Russian Jewish guy, like dark black hair. I think he had, like, piercing blue eyes. He was so cute, and he was very short and all furry and a beard. And, I come in to talk to him because I wanted some antidepressants. I knew that I needed something. And, says, like, "Well, what can I help you with today?" in some accent. And I couldn't even speak. I was so choked up, and I just started bawling. And I remember he had a clipboard in his hands, and he was like, and he puts his clipboard down. He said, and he puts his hand on my shoulder. He says, "What's wrong?" What? And I
Right.
was barely able to choke out that I didn't feel something along the lines of, I didn't feel the same as other people around me. And that's all I could say. And he went to their cabinet, and he gave me all of their samples of Lexapro that they had. He just cleaned out, like, fistfuls of boxes of Lexapro,
Okay.
and
Okay.
he had samples available for, like, people to give
Oh,
to, and he just went and got fistfuls of these things and put them in a brown paper bag and said,
like you
"Start
need this.
start taking these. Take 1 a day. Start taking these." And I have this big, like, brown paper sack of boxes of, antidepressants, and, he gave me a referral to a psychiatrist. That psychiatrist, her first name was Camille. I don't remember her last name, and I don't know why I remember her name as Camille. But she, I went and saw her once. She was pretty fantastic with letting me talk about what was going on. For the first time, I felt like I could actually say, I'm gay. I don't know what to do. I've got a big struggle with my family, my belief system, my religion, with God. I don't know what to do. And she basically said, keep taking the Lexapro, and then started managing my antidepressants, and immediately referred me to a group therapy that she was conducting. And she said, I think you'd be good for this. And so I went to group therapy, and it was not a gay specific group therapy. It was just, I can still see some of the faces of the people there. It was just a group of about 7 or 8 of us that would go in and talk about what was going on with us in the world, and we were struggling with largely just relationships. I was the only one in there that was gay, but everyone had their own kinds of things they were going through. And that thing, I really kind of say that that really saved me, the group therapy. That was really,
Well, it's safe,
it was safe. It was strangers that I could talk to that gave no
right?
judgment to me, you know?
Community,
Yeah. It was very it was very welcoming. Everyone was there to just hear each other and support each other. And so I experienced the ability to be able to say who I am and have no judgment back and be accepted anyway. And do the same for other people because, they were all struggling with their own things as well. And so that really, and so also while I was in Africa, but we would, the people that I did talk to and help while sitting, it really started to feel to me, I could probably be a therapist. This feels like something I
oh,
could do, I could be good at. I enjoyed
okay.
the conversations. I really liked helping people in that way. It was really my experience as a missionary in Africa that made me believe I could be a therapist. And
Interesting.
so then when I get to this point and I'm doing group therapy and I was still thinking I think I would be a good therapist because I had started to go to junior college to become a therapist all at the same time when I came back from Africa. So group therapy though really saved me. I mean, it was unbelievable. And I describe to people who ask me about this now that the antidepressants I really feel really helped me because I describe it as feeling like I was at the bottom of a well, and
I remember you. Yeah.
yeah, I think I've told you about this, and that the medication really kind of was the leg up I needed to pull myself out of the well. And I stopped taking the antidepressants, but I don't see how I could have come through all that without those and without the group experience.
But it's interesting you brought that up because it's such a perfect analogy. And to this day, if I know someone who's feeling low, I always share that because it's something people can relate to. Well, maybe not at that level. Yeah, I am that.
Yeah,
And so I'm glad you shared that today because I've even used it for myself and I've shared it with other people. So uh, I'm fascinated too that the mission, this is what I love how everything works.
yeah,
Something that could have, it was, labeled a certain way and not forced, but you do it out there. But at the end of the day, too, it's part of being of service. But that brought you to a place to see, wait a minute, I'm good at this and the therapy. So I just love that when that stuff,
yeah.
that synergy
It
happens.
really it really feels like that because that's really kind of what I got from the missionary experience was it really, helped me to solidify what I was gonna do for the rest of my life, And then
Right.
and I am, so it kind of worked, I think. It was an interesting time where I was starting to feel like it's either one or the other. I can't live 2 lives. I can't pretend with my family that I'm, just kinda single and I don't know, while also being in love with this man and living with him, it started to really eat at me, and I could not manage being 2 different people, at least, because the 3rd kind of person I was the, what I was supposed to be from the church standpoint also, that kind of, like, the expectations there.
You had some serious things that you were
Yeah, right.
I mean, both are extreme.
Yes. So at one point, I decided to tell my family and friends, and so I remember the first friend I told was my friend Star, but I told her that I was gay, and she immediately said, I knew, I just was
Interesting.
waiting for you to tell me," that kind of thing, and that was really relieving for me to understand, to know that she understood and didn't have to say anything about it, but it clearly accepted me anyway. And then I remember telling my little sister Emily, and I remember clearly I was sitting in my car with her, and I told her that I was gay, and she was very accepting of me right off the bat. She knew that something was different about me, and she had guessed that it was probably that I was gay. So she pretty much put it together. And then I told her that I was afraid of telling, mom and dad, I'm afraid that they're gonna reject me and I get thrown out on the street, which, is a little dramatic for my family because I don't really know that I would believe that they would do something like that kind of dramatic, but they were hardcore Mormon. They gave us all these teachings to live by. We went to church all the time, you know. I felt like they were gonna reject me. Whether they threw me out, I don't know. I didn't live with them at that point, but if they threw me out of the family, I didn't
Yeah.
think they would do that, but, there's the psychic, rejection, and my little sister said to me, "That's not fair to them. You are not even giving them the chance to not reject you. You're making the decision for them, and that's not fair. You can't do that." And I thought, "Oh, she's right. She's right. I need to tell them." And so
So scary.
yeah, so I went back, to my I went to my family. I was determined to tell my family, and, I decided to tell my dad first. I knew that my father would probably be a little more understanding about this, and so I told my da I went home and I asked him if I could talk to him. I went into his bedroom, and, I told him that I was gay, and the first thing he said to me was, "You're my son, and I love you no matter what." And, he said, "This doesn't change anything about how I feel about you." And he said that he loved me. So I said, and we hugged and things like that, and that was really alleviating for me. That alleviated a lot for me, and so I had to tell my mother, and, I didn't tell her that same that same night. I basically was like, "Dad, I'm gay," and then I was like, "Bye," and I, like, left, went back to my apartment, and about a
Did you know that he wouldn't tell her?
he told me I told him, "Please don't tell mom. I'm not re"
Okay, that's what I just wanted to make clear.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
I said, "I'm not ready to tell her yet," and he said, "Okay." And
Okay.
about a week later, I think it was at their house for something, and, he pulled me aside or went into the bedroom again. We didn't do anything in the open in my family. And so he tells me, "You need to tell your mother or I will." He said,
Oh,
I am beholden to her first, and you're putting me in a really bad position, and I will not continue
I
to
love
act like
him.
I don't know this about you. You have to tell her I will." So I told my
Right.
mother, and my mother's response was more thin-lipped, kinda like this, and she said, well, she said something like, it's a phase that I'm sure you'll get through, and, you continue to pray to Heavenly Father and you'll get through this, That was her response. So, and then I said, "Bye," and went home 'cause I'm like, "Whatever."
Right. People will say, "When did you know
Yeah,
you're gay?"
yeah,
I think it's important if you are okay with that to talk about that because it's people are thinking they did something or it
yeah,
can be prayed away or your dad was, like, yeah, but I mean, that's what's so
yeah,
fascinating where he was like, "Okay, it's fine." But I think that's where a lot of people, I would imagine, don't share because is it worth keeping yourself not being able to be who you are or hearing that rejection?
yeah, yeah. The thing that years after I told my mother, and I mean probably 2 or 3 years as she was kind of coming to terms with it herself, and
Yeah.
struggling with it. I had a conversation with her about it, and I've always conceptualized it this way, gay is the thing that nobody wants to be. Straight is the thing that everyone wants to be.
All
And
right.
so you look at gay as like, well, when did you know? How, what made you gay? And it's like, if you just shift it, which I did with my mother and said, when did you decide you were straight? Like, when did you know you were straight? And there's a question I ask in a lot of my classes that I teach around this topic. And I ask people, when did you know that you were straight? And they don't know. So
Right.
why does anyone think it'd be different for me? And I even used the religion concept against my mom in some ways. And I told her, do you think that something as important as sexuality, as important as what sexuality, do you think that God would give me more of a choice over that than you? That he would say, you have no choice, you're just straight. But John, you get to choose. You have to choose. Do you think you would put that in my hands as, whether you believe in God or not? I was using that in her language around her belief system of like, why do you think God would give me that choice and not you? If you've never come up with a date that you decided you were straight or a reason because of this one interaction like that happened like that, when you kind of turn it around, it I think it makes more sense, and it really does point to the idea that this is who I am. There isn't some kind of thing that has happened that made me this way, and a lot of people think that. And then there's also plenty of people who do come to terms with it later and understand, well, I realized I was gay, and I came to the knowledge I was gay in my 30s. That's a real thing too. Like, that
Right.
doesn't mean it's not
Right.
so.
Well, I'm glad that you said that is because I think no one would choose that.
Well, I've asked my
And that,
brother that. Like, do you think I would have chosen to have rocks thrown at my head, to be called
right.
horrible
Or
names,
be killed.
to be killed,
Right.
to every day
Not get
be
a job, get
every single
fired.
day think, and then what people a lot of people don't realize is that every single day gay people come out. Every single day. There are people that you don't know out there that see you, then clock you. And they know. Or like me, I will never go into the closet for anyone. And so I am who I am. And by interacting with people, they may get a sense and understand that I'm gay, which is fine. But that's coming out. I don't know how they're going to react to me.
Right.
Eh, I came out when I was 22, so it's taken me, what, 36 years and counting? It's every day. I mean, I'm think I'm faced with that decision every day of my life to correct or not, to go along with the assumption that I'm what they think I am versus who I truly am. I'm faced with that assumption every single day of my life. And I'm not joking about that. It's not like I'm not exaggerating. It's every day. Jeff and I go anywhere. We don't know what we're going to get, you know?
It reminds me of we both worked for the city of West
Yeah.
Hollywood. And so everyone was saying we're safe here.
Mm,
We can be safe
yeah.
here. We can come out here.
Yeah.
And even after 20 years later on in my career, people still saying, I work here because I can be safe here.
Yes, that is very real and it's very important. It's important to keep those spaces, I think, too. And a lot of society doesn't realize what that means because a lot of people think a coming out story or experience is a one and done thing. I came out to my dad on that one day. A couple weeks later to my mom, I came out. That's only the beginning, and people don't
That's a
realize
good
how
point.
much you have to do it all the time. And that you are faced with the decision every day to either be who you are or not be who you are. And you could choose to not be. I don't make that choice though. But I have a luxury and a privilege, I would say, because of what I look like and who people think
Mm,
I am, that I can get
okay.
away with, like, not have I don't have to say it if I don't want to, but I do because I will never live under that kind of a lie again. It was living under that lie is being in that well, it's just I won't do that again. Coming out of closets are they say these things and it's cliche a bit, but closets are for clothes. They're not for life and growth. Like, how many houseplants do you buy and put them in a closet? Like, you put stuff in the closet to put away and not be seen, not looked at. I don't want to live that way. And that means
It's a level of suffering.
and yeah, and that means walking
Eat you
on the
up.
street with as who I am. And correcting people when they make assumptions that I'm straight, you know?
Well, I'm glad that you're sharing that piece of it because if someone who is having their loved one or friend who's coming out to them, what is advice for them? Because I think a lot of people aren't sure what to say. They don't want to say the wrong thing. Or I could see people trusting what you might consider them to say.
Well, as you're asking the question, you know what's rising up for me is, this month, Pride Month, you see love everywhere. You see love wins everywhere. That's the only thing you have to give really is love. Someone says I'm out. I think I'm gay. The response can and should be I love you, and not I love you anyway. I love you. It's
Very simple.
you are who you are, and I love you. That's it. I think that's all people really need or want when they're revealing parts of themselves, revealing who you are and who you truly are, your authentic self. I think we all yearn for that to be met with love. That's it, loved, but we also want to be liked, we want to be accepted by the people who were here when we got here. It's like I want to be included and liked and
Belonging.
yeah, I want to belong and loved. It all falls under the umbrella of love, I think that's the best.
Well well, especially it just reminded me when you were talking, like, it's not something people choose. So, I know I have friends that are of your age range, and for some, it changed who they were originally going to be
Yeah,
because of all what they went through in their
yeah,
childhood and I'm gonna be a lawyer, I'm gonna be this, I'm gonna
yeah,
be maybe then I'll be accepted. And so I'm glad that I think that's a big thing for people. Let's shut that down
yeah,
because
and that
yeah.
transcends, being gay and all of that too, that's people do that to their children all the time, like, you're only going to be lovable if you do these things.
I think there's a lot of correlations of just being rejected, not being accepted. I think that's what people need to take a step back and see that we all, like we say, we all want to be loved. We all have our stuff.
Yeah.
See, with all the things you've talked about, what is one thing that you hope someone listening can take away from it?
The first thing off the top of my head is be who you are. Be your authentic
Okay.
self. You will never ever experience the thrill of living, the success that you experience, the joy of all the things that you have if you're not true to yourself and living authentically.
Well, you're a good example of that.
I hope so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One of my favorite moments from this conversation is when John says, "Love wins, always." If you know someone who is navigating their own coming out journey, or if you're looking for support in your own story, I hope this conversation reminds you that you're not alone. Until next time, let's fly.